Welcome to the Redbird Report, your destination for the latest on the St. Louis Cardinals. Here are your hosts, BK and T-Bone.
Good to be back. New year, same us here on the Redbird Report alongside Tanner Hendrickson. I'm Brandon Kiley. Appreciate you being along for the ride. We have real news to pass along. The Cardinals have avoided arbitration, T-Bone, with a boatload of their players. There will be no arbitration hearings. I think this is a really good thing. Arbitration hearings, according to people that have been a part of them, absolutely suck. They're miserable. The organization has to tear apart their own players to say, hey, we shouldn't pay you the money that you're probably worth. It's $500,000, whatever, but we're going to argue the other side of it. But this year, they won't have to do that because they were able to find a common point, a midpoint, so to speak, with Brendan Donovan, Lars Nootbaar, Jojo Romero, Andre Palante, Alec Burleson, Nolan Gorman, and Matthew Liberatore. Those 7 players have agreed to terms with the Cardinals. There isn't a file and trial approach this year. It is simply, here's what you're going to make. Let's all go into camp happy. Can we? Does it sound good, everybody? Great. The numbers are basically somewhere between $2 and $5 million. If you want to see the exact numbers, go ahead and go over to Twitter. They've been posted everywhere today. T-Bone, I love it. I'm happy about it. I think it's a welcomed sign. Last year, they went to arbitration against Brendan Donovan for $500,000, a guy that's considered to be one of the leaders of the clubhouse, a guy who is everything that you want the Cardinals to be. He works his butt off. He plays anywhere you ask him to. Like, he played through injuries, which is going to lead to worse numbers, you would assume, and the Cardinals then have to go back into arbitration to use that against him. It never made any sense to me, and now they can avoid doing that. What was your reaction today when you saw the news? Real legitimate news that the Cardinals are avoiding arbitration with these players.
Yeah, well, first off, I'm glad that they were able to settle because going to the arbitration process, you're right, it always is like the worst thing for these guys. And some guys handle it well, like Donovan handled it really well last year. Some guys, Tyler O'Neill, who I'm thinking of, don't handle it very well. So it's good to see that they're able to settle on it, but maybe most importantly is, and I kind of figured they would settle on Donnie and JoJo. I wasn't sure if they would on some of the other guys just because of the nitpicking on the numbers. But I was very confident they were going to settle on Donnie and JoJo just so you could lock in what their salary is going to be because it makes things easier in theory for trade. I don't know how much it would have really hurt those guys, but now teams know exactly what those guys are going to be making going into this year. So it at least makes it easier for teams that have interest in Donovan. They can go, okay, we know he's going to be making $5.8 million this year. Then they can project forward for the rest of ARB. Same for a JoJo Romero. So I'm not surprised to see that they locked those guys in just because we've seen that can become hold up in trade conversations in the past for guys. I don't think that was necessarily what was holding up any kind of trade for Brendan Donovan. I think it's the whole offseason is just in a logjam. There's literally nothing that's happened on a Major League Baseball front since our last podcast. But I think it's good to see that they were able to get these numbers solidified into place because it just makes things a little bit easier. It's not an obstacle to avoid.
Yeah, on the Donovan front, the thing that it also helps to avoid is a new team acquiring Brendan Donovan and only wanting him for the next 2 years, because that may be the case. A new team may not want to sign him to a long-term extension, and the first thing they have to do is argue against Brendan Donovan in arbitration in the event that they acquire him. Cardinals couldn't come to terms with him, and now they have to be the ones that take over in that arbitration process. Nobody wants that. So if you were planning to trade any of these guys between now and basically like middle of spring training is when a lot of these are taking place, I think at times, this was a smart way to go about it. So whether it is cost certainty for the Cardinals or cost certainty for one of the other 29 clubs across Major League Baseball, in my opinion, it was the right way to approach this for the Cardinals, and none of the numbers jump out at you as like significant overpays. None of them really jump out at me on the other side of things of, oh man, that's way lower than I expected. It's pretty much in line with what most of the projections were. Matthew Liberatore at $2.3 million is a little lower. Derek Gould has explained this on Twitter today, saying basically that's because he's a Super 2 status player, so he made more in the pre-arb process. because he was in it for longer, but he'll make a little less in the early portion of the arbitration process. He'll make it up over time. The other one, man, is it nice to be a starting pitcher in Major League Baseball. Andre Pallante going out there, doing what he did last year, and now getting a nice $4 million payday in 2026. That's not a bad life to live if you're Andre Pallante.
Yeah, not bad for a starting pitcher. And like you said, it just shows you the value that these guys carry across the sport, because it's not even like he was really an innings eater, right? He did post every day, which is very important for a starting pitcher, but you never know what you're going to get from him. You knew he was probably going to walk 3. So the one thing you did know is that he was not going to be a guy that was going to be controlling the strike zone a lot. And he averaged only like 5 and dive for him for the season. Those are not like positives that I just read off for a starting pitcher. And he just got paid pretty well in the arbitration process. So it goes to show you how much the sport is valuing starting pitching. And you really have seen that both with that ARB number from Andre Pallante, the trade market, how it's really developed, the Cabrera deal with the Cubs, how they gave up their top prospect, with the Shane Baz trade we saw earlier in the year where Baltimore basically gave up a first-round pick for, again, another guy that has proven he can't stay healthy. Like, it's insane the value that these starting pitchers are carrying across the market.
By the way, you said he's not an innings eater. You know how many starters had more innings last year than Andre Pallante? In all of Major League Baseball, not on the Cardinals.
What was he at? What was his numbers?
162 and 2/3 innings.
Oh, this is going to be sad if it's like top 25. Was it? I'll say
It's not that bad.
It's not that bad?
It's he's 51st. He's tied.
Okay.
If you go by the tiebreakers, he's tied for 49th in Major League Baseball in innings pitched last year, which means most teams had 1, maybe 2 starters that threw more innings for them than Andre Pallante did for the St. Louis Cardinals a year ago. Again, speaks to guys just aren't eating innings the way that they once were.
It speaks to guys don't eat innings like they used to, and it speaks to just how often pitchers are injured too.
Yeah.
Because I think that's the other big factor. What did Pallante do? Because again, he wasn't an innings eater. He'd go like 5 a start, which I guess nowadays is an innings eater. But he posted, man, like good for Andre Pallante.
Started 31 games.
Yeah. Most guys across baseball, like you look at it, like Edward Cabrera just got traded. I think he started 15 games last year. Like, he's just a guy that's never been healthy. So
I think he got to 140 innings last year. It was the first time in his career that he's reached that threshold, though. He's not a guy that posts.
Yeah.
He's very talented, wildly talented. He just doesn't end up starting many games, which is kind of a big part of this game is, are you available? Can I actually put you out there on the starter's mound? And you brought up the Edward Cabrera trade. Just to hone in on this for a second, it speaks to the direction that the Cardinals are heading in. The amount of capital that the Cubs had to give up to acquire Edward Cabrera. They had to give up their top prospect in their system to acquire this guy with a couple of years of club control remaining. Again, prior to this year, had basically no experience or no history of posting every 5th day. But he's got stuff, and last year he finally showed it. So the Cubs give up their top prospect in order to acquire him. A top prospect, by the way, who's major league ready. Like, he should have been their starting outfielder next year. So the Marlins are able to get him. Good return. We saw what the Cardinals were able to get in return for a pretty expensive version of Sonny Gray, who basically has 1 year remaining on his contract. The amount that teams are having to give up either in cash via free agency or capital via trade to acquire pitchers that can start in the top 3 for a contending club, that's why the Cardinals had to do this step back, because they failed to develop those guys. When you do, you have them for cheap. You also have them for trade assets, because then if you have the surplus, well, we can use one of these guys to restock our farm system or to restock our positional player talent. Like, that's what the Marlins just did. Hey, we've got a decent number of starters. We like a lot of them. This guy's really good. We'd like to keep him, but we're lacking on the bat side. Let's go ahead and use this to go ahead and restock our positional player side of things. Cardinals don't have that. They don't have it available to them right now. Now they're trying to restock the system. All right, let's go out there. Let's get some interesting arms. Let's get some strikeout stuff. Those guys are always sought after, whether they're relievers or starters, especially if they're starters. Mm-hmm. Now is the time when they can go out there and hopefully make some of those moves.
Yeah, because they could not have been able to pull off either of those trades for the controllable arms that we've seen get moved, Baz and Cabrera. They just don't have the pipeline to do it. And like you said, if you can create a pipeline, like look at Miami. Why do they trade Cabrera? it's because not only do they have a couple arms that are ready, they've just got a complete pipeline. They keep churning out pitching in Miami. Now, it goes under the radar because, one, nobody's at those games, and two, they've been bad for so long.
Yeah, their positional player side of things is that bad.
Yeah. So, like, they're able to go do this to help upgrade them. And look at Pittsburgh. They haven't traded from their surplus just yet, but they've been talked about as looking potentially to do that. Pittsburgh's got a bit of a pipeline as well. It's what Milwaukee's done in the past, right? Milwaukee will trade away. Now, they go more for the guys in the free agency as they get more expensive. But why can they do that? Why can they move on from a Burns a year early? Because they've got plenty of guys that are coming up through their system. So you constantly have to be churning through this. And you're right. It's why the Cardinals had to take a step back. They tried throwing money at the problem. Now, we can argue if they did that in the right way or not. The answer was no. They threw money at pitching more to contact and valuing guys that could post rather than let's just get a bunch of guys that miss bats. But again, they kind of had to do that too because they didn't have guys behind their 5 stars because we've talked about it on the Redbird Report. What would have happened last year if they lost a guy? We don't know. They didn't know. They had no idea who their 6th starter was. McGreevy, and then if another guy went down, they had no clue. They truly had no clue. And you can't get by most baseball seasons with that kind of a approach.
I mean, we can localize this. Look at who the Cardinals traded with so far this offseason. The Boston Red Sox had the pitching depth in their system, which allowed them to go out there and acquire Sonny Gray and Wilson Contreras.
Yep.
Like their major league roster is better today because they had the depth to be able to acquire a new player or two from. That's most of the news that has taken place since the last time that we spoke prior to the holiday break. The update that we have, not news, but more speculation, is on Brendan Donovan. Ken Rosenthal reports the following. Why have the Cardinals not yet traded Brendan Donovan? The player who could bring them the most in a deal? Well, it comes down to a difference in perceived value. The Cardinals view Donovan as a star player, while not all clubs see him that way, according to people briefed on the conversations. Donovan is also under control for only 2 more seasons, the second of which could be threatened by a lockout. The Royals remain among the teams interested, but if the Cardinals prefer premium bats, the Mariners are perhaps the best fit. We don't have to talk about the teams today that are potentially in on Donnie. We've spent enough time talking about that. I want to take this a different direction because we are now in mid-January. Next weekend, T-Bone, the Cardinals will host winter warm-up. I don't know if Donovan will be there or not. My guess is he probably will be. But that means that we're getting close to the start of spring training. That's kind of the reminder, okay, the team is starting to be assembled, where this is the roster
Come
in
see the
place.
guys that'll be at spring training in Florida. Well, yeah, maybe.
Yeah. So Donovan, at least today, is a part of that. What if he's also a part of it once we get to the regular season? What if after all of this, after everything we've talked about this offseason, it's Wilson Contreras and Sonny Gray are gone, and they don't bring back the free agents that were here from a year ago, and they go young, and Donnie is a part of that. How would you feel in the event that the Cardinals opt against trading Brendan Donovan and also don't extend Brendan Donovan? Would that be okay in your mind?
I think it's okay. I don't think it's the worst thing in the world. I think there are some people that would say that's awful. You have to trade him because his value is probably at the highest it's going to be at. And that is probably true, right? And it's not so much based on the fact that I don't think he can repeat what he did last year. It's more of control. Control is really what boosts value. You know, you got to be good, but you also control is the biggest thing that teams really look at. And the reason that I don't say that it would be the worst case scenario if he's back, and I would still try and trade him, to be clear, but if he comes back without a contract extension, you can still potentially trade him at the trade deadline. Somebody's probably going to need to upgrade their offense this coming trade deadline this season, or you can potentially move him in the offseason again. Again, the value will be lower, but you can still try and work out a trade for him, and instead of trying to get maybe 2 top 100 prospects or one top 100 prospect and like a fringe guy, you probably only end up with just one of those guys. But I don't think it's the worst thing in the world. And the other thing I would add to this too, we talk about what they're going to get in return. And a lot of guys that they're probably going to get in return, if they get a top 100 prospect, it's not going to be at the level of what we just saw the Cubs trade. That was a top, I think, 50 prospect in all of baseball. It's probably going to be a guy that's kind of in that like 80 to 100 range is probably where you're getting. And it's probably more likely 90 to 100 range. That's a good player. Don't get me wrong. That is a good player. But the thing that I hear that I think keeps getting misconstrued with the Brendan Donovan trade sweepstakes is this is the trade that kind of accelerates the rebuild or the retool, whatever you want to call it. And I don't think that's the case, because when I think of like these top 100 prospects, these guys that are viewed as in that 90 to 100 range, 80 to 100 range, it's typically the next Brendan Donovan. It's not a guy that changes the course of a franchise next 10-year run. It's a guy that can slide in and be a complementary piece. And just to use some context here, I went back and I pulled up Keith Law's top 100 prospects from 2021. And I'm going to read from 87 through 100, just some of the guys that have made it to the big leagues. And you tell me if any of these guys have altered a franchise or could have altered a franchise if you acquired them. Tristan Casas, first baseman of the Red Sox. Jonathan India.
No.
You know him very well. J.J. Bleday.
No.
Geraldo Perdomo.
No.
Alejandro Kirk.
Perdomo, by the way, maybe I was a little too dismissive on him. Kirk is a really good player.
Kirk's a really good player. I think Perdomo's a really good player. I don't know if he's a guy that alters your franchise.
Sure.
Jaron Duran.
I really like Jaron Duran.
I think really good player.
Yes.
I think really good player. I don't think he fits into that.
Okay, I'll ask the follow-up question.
Pete Crow Armstrong was the next one.
What are you talking about?
I think a guy that like would alter your team is a middle of the order bat, a star, or a starting pitch, like a really good starting pitcher.
Agreed, but like the Cardinals probably aren't getting that in any trade.
I agree. That's why, like, I think it gets misconstrued that they can accelerate this rebuild by what they're doing this offseason.
That comes, though, from the losing. The benefit of the losing is the player you're describing. The reason that you would trade Brendan Donovan, and this is why I'm struggling with it, like, I think you kind of do need to trade Brendan Donovan. I'm not really sure what the value is of bringing him back. I don't think that you get more by him staying than by him being traded right now. Like, I think this is the time where you maximize the return for Brendan Donovan. Position players, I think, are more valuable right now than they are at the trade deadline, by and large.
I agree.
So what's the point? What are you waiting on? Why would you continue to wait until the trade deadline? I agree. The player that you acquire is probably not going to be the next face of the franchise. But Brendan Donovan is also probably not going to be here when you're contending again in the event that you don't extend him. So what is the line of thinking that would lead you to keep him?
We didn't get the return we wanted. And like what I mean by that,
that's not out there. Like if it's not there now, it's probably not going to be there at the trade deadline.
I agree with that. I think, but when you get to like, if you can't trade him now or up until we get to spring training or whatever, you have to change what your stance is on what the return you want is the maximize of the return when you get to the trade deadline and when you get into the next offseason if he's still here.
Where I struggle, okay, then what was the point of waiting? If you're going to have to alter at some point, either now or at the trade deadline, what the return is going to be for Donnie, because you're expecting less at the trade deadline than you would right now by virtue of the fact that you have 3 or 4 fewer months. If you're the acquiring team, you're the team that's getting Brendan Donovan. And I want his services for as long as humanly possible because he's a good player. He helps us win. If you're the Cardinals and you're going to get less in July than you would right now, what is the value for you as the Cardinals of having him for the next 4 months then?
I would think that right now what you would be hoping for then in that scenario, like right now, I think you're still holding out hope that someone budges, someone gets desperate enough and loses out. And because now it's not the case because I think it's probably down to 2 or 3 teams here now at this point, but there's a better chance there's more teams involved now than there are at the deadline. And there's a better chance that then that means you can get more of what your asking price is, so you don't have to do what we're talking about. But I don't know that I don't think you should cave from what you're asking for here. If you don't get what you need to, I think you probably do have to wait the 4 months to get to that point where we get back to the trade deadline and have these conversations.
But why?
Because I think you need to be targeting what you view as your best return, right? I don't think you should be settling on, let's just say they're asking for top 100 prospect, that's a position player, another top 100 prospect that's a starting pitcher, and then you can throw in a lottery ticket. I'm not wavering on that because I probably still get at least one of those guys at the trade deadline. I want to see if I can get that second one. And I think I can really push teams here in a bidding war now compared to waiting up until the trade deadline.
But if I'm operating under the assumption that you can't, because you might not, there may be no budging if you're one of these other teams. The other teams may say, we're not giving you that. Brendan Donovan's career high in wins above replacement is 4. It was his rookie season. Over the last 3 years, there's injuries that are a part of this. 1.9, 2.6, 2.7. He's a very good player. We like Brendan Donovan. We agree with you on that. But he's not Juan Soto. Like, I'm not giving you a return that will alter your franchise's trajectory. That's not happening for Brendan Donovan, who's 29 years old and is a super utility player. Good player. I love Brendan Donovan personally. I also would not give up crazy assets to be able to acquire him. So if teams don't budge and the Cardinals do go into opening day with him still on the roster, I think it'll be a mistake. I think it will look back on this and say they missed on their opportunity to get the greatest return possible, because the return in July will be less than the return. I would be surprised if it's not, will be less than the return that they could get right now, even if they have to budge, even if they have to say, you know what? Nobody's going to give us that second top 100 prospect. We're going to have to drop our asking price. Now we can get one top 100 pitching prospect. We can get a really intriguing, further away position player prospect and a lottery ticket. That's what we'll be able to get in return for Brendan Donovan. That's not a bad return. It's a really good return. It's maybe not what you were hoping for. Maybe you do have to take slightly less than what the asking price originally was. There are market factors that will play into that, including the availability this offseason of Bo Bichette and Alex Bregman, and at one time, potentially Ketel Marte, the fact that the Pirates were able to turn their attention to a second baseman from the Rays, the fact that now it sounds like Alec Boehm might be out there potentially available via trade, depending on what happens with the Phillies, and they're not the only team. You could see Nico Horner available if the Cubs end up getting in on Bo Bichette's market or Alex Bregman's market. So there are factors here beyond the Cardinals' control. And if you're not able to get the return that you were looking for, you might have to settle. Sometimes that happens in life where you don't get everything you were asking for. And if it doesn't happen now, it sure as hell will not happen next year at the trade deadline. And then his value continues to go down from there because you have less control and he continues to age. I think this is the kind of deal where if you're talking about intangibles, that's really all you can sell me on. Brendan Donovan being around the club and showing JJ Weatherholt how to go about his business and being the leader of this team and keeping the group together as they probably go through a decent amount of losing early on in the season. If that is what they deem to be the value of Brendan Donovan, and they place enough value on that it's worth that second top 100 prospect or that second top or fringe top 100 prospect, I could listen to the argument. Truly, I could be convinced on that. But if it's just about the return, I think you have to get the best return possible prior to opening day. And that may be in spring training. We may have to wait a little bit of time. I'm open to that as well. I'm not criticizing them now for not getting it done yet. But if it doesn't get done before opening day, I think it'll end up being looked back upon as a mistake by the St. Louis Cardinals.
Again, because I would trade him this offseason, I'm trying to argue the opposite side of having him here. To your point, though, it feels very much like a move Mo would make, right? How often, now it's different because it wasn't selling, but it was trying to capitalize on assets to get more major league ready talent. How often do we see the Cardinals look at like a Carlson and an O'Neill and I guess Bader kind of fell into this since he was rumored to be in a Bader for, Wheeler trade. How often did they say, no, not yet. Let's see. And then when they would see what they didn't like, they go, hey, who wants Carlson? And the rest of baseball is like, yeah, no, we've seen it, right? You've diminished the value on, at the time, it would be more of a prospect / kind of a major league ready guy. That can be the case for Donovan, and it's too risky to go into the season because I think one advantage you have with Donovan if you go to the Major League Baseball trade deadline with him is the fact that injuries occur. And if a team gets desperate and needs a left-handed bat, which is very valuable, and a lot of teams will potentially need on base. He's not going to be the slugger the teams are looking for. But a guy that gets on base and has the versatility that he has, and I expect he's still going to have a good year offensively for you, he could be coveted. And the nice part for him, you lose your left fielder, guess what? You can trade for Brendan Donovan. You lose your third baseman, guess what? You can trade for Brendan Donovan. Second baseman, boom, you can trade for Brendan Donovan. that's the nice part about having him going into the deadline and just kind of looking and projecting how I assume things are going to play out. He's going to be one of the top trade chips available at the deadline from a position player standpoint. But again, that's a lot of hope, right? Like that is a lot of factors if you want to get back up to what you're saying of his max value now versus max value at the deadline. If you're going to get his max value up to what it is now, you probably need injuries to occur and have a bunch of hope that things happen to go your way, and that's probably too risky.
If you wanted to argue the other side, I think the argument would start and maybe end with Ben Zobrist. Ben Zobrist in 2015, this is a decade ago. Baseball is a completely different game than it was back then, but he was traded from Oakland to Kansas City, and in return, they got some big-time prospects, including Sean Manaea, who was a high-level pitching prospect in Major League Baseball at the time. The Royals gave him up as a part of that deal because they were all in on trying to win a World Series. A team that could fit into that kind of criteria this year is like the Toronto Blue Jays, for example. If they want to go, or the Seattle Mariners, a team that's already in on it, maybe they get just completely desperate at the deadline. I suppose that's possible. I think baseball has changed enough, though, over the last decade that those kinds of prospects, just generally speaking, don't change hands at the trade deadline the way that they once did, especially for position players with less than 2 years of club control at that point in time. So I think you are getting diminishing returns on Brendan Donovan. I don't believe that the Cardinals are expecting to win this year. And when you put all of this together, I just continue to believe. I don't like saying this. I would rather the Cardinals were in a spot today where they were trying to win. That would be the best case scenario. But since they're not, it makes all the sense in the world for the Cardinals to go out there and trade Brendan Donovan this offseason. All right, alongside Tanner Hendrickson, I'm Brandon Kiley. Coming up next, I want to compare the Cardinals to a team that objectively had a bad season a year ago.
Oh, woohoo!
But I do think it's maybe the best case scenario for the Cardinals in 2026. I'll tell you who that team is, and I want to hear how T-Bone would feel if this is the way that the Cardinals 2026 season went. Coming up next here on the Redbird Report. Welcome back to the Redbird Report. All right, so last year, the don't call me Las Vegas, don't call me Oakland, we're just the Athletics, went 76 and 86. That is objectively, especially by Cardinal standards, not a good season. However, the standards are changing here in St. Louis, and so we're going to have to start viewing them through a different prism. The A's last year, T-Bone, were 42 and 62 through their first 104 games. They finished the season on a hot stretch. They were 34 and 24 the rest of the way. They also had some young players that took significant steps forward and are maybe going to be the next young core of a winning Athletics team. Shane Langeliers, a guy that they traded for a few years ago, he took the next step. He's 27 years old, young catcher, really good. He was previously, like 10, 15% above league average offensively. Well, last year, he hit 30 home runs, 75 ribbies, and had an 860 OPS. That's a hell of a season for a catcher. That is basically the step that I think the Cardinals would like to see Alec Burleson take. So that's step one. Step two, Jacob Wilson, a really nice young shortstop in Major League Baseball. Last season came in as a rookie, hit .310 for the Athletics. You look under the hood, maybe it's not super legitimate, has basically no power whatsoever, but a good contact guy, plays solid defense, a rookie, something to build around. Sounds kind of similar to Mason Wynn if he takes that next step, especially with his average plus on base percentage. Now, Nick Kurtz is somebody I don't think the Cardinals have.
Oh, we don't have that guy?
No, he hit 36 home runs in 117 games last year. That's insane. It's like a 50 home run pace over the course of a full season. He had crazy raw power as a draft pick. It translated to the major leagues. He had an OPS over 1,000. Again, I'm not saying this player is going to be Nick Kurtz for the Cardinals. He's not going to be, but J.J. Weatherholt could come in and win National League Rookie of the Year next year the way that Nick Kurtz did with the AL Rookie of the Year last season for the Athletics. That's basically the A's young core. Langeliers, Wilson, Kurtz. They're building around them and hoping that the rest will come. The Cardinals could have something similar. Mason Wynn, J.J. Weatherholt, Ivan Herrera, Alec Burleson. Those guys could come out next year and have really good seasons, and the Cardinals could still be pretty bad, especially if their rotation is as bad as we expect and as the A's was a year ago. How would you feel about that? Cards win 76 games. A few of the young guys have interesting and productive seasons. Is that what success looks like for the Cardinals in 2026?
I think so. My initial reaction when we had this conversation, just for a glimpse as to what goes in before the podcast, we sit in the office, we talk, and decide what we're going to talk about. And my initial reaction, you brought this up, and I went, absolutely. I mean, man, if I got to watch bad baseball, at least give me 3 things to get excited about. Burleson taking the next step. Mason Wynn kind of establishes himself, at least from an offensive perspective. And then you end up with like a potential rookie of the year, maybe not the Gotti numbers, but a rookie of the year in J.J. Weatherholt. And then as I say that, I still think it would be. I think next year's going to be very hard to define what success is for 2026. And the reason that I say that is, okay, everything that we just said, even if Weatherholt wins Rookie of the Year, I got to see him repeat it before I can just really start saying, okay, Weatherholt really is a success. Because how often do we see a guy put up really good numbers, is top 5 Rookie of the Year or wins Rookie of the Year, and then you look back 3 years later and go, man, that guy like fell off of a cliff. Look at Jonathan India. That guy won Rookie of the Year, and he fell off of a cliff. Dylan Carlson ended up being, I think, top 5 in Rookie of the Year, and then he fell off of a cliff. So the reason that I bring that up is, yes, I think that would be a success, but I find it so hard to define it because it's hard to define, because all these pieces that you said, like these numbers for Burleson, those offensive numbers for if Mason Wynn does what Jacob Wilson did, that's great. Those are still complementary players. And it's hard to really find out how much success you really are having as an organization until you have a star in place. And until I hear what the plan is or how their path is to getting to that guy, or before I even see a star come back to St. Louis, I don't know how you can define when the rebuild will be, these individual years across this rebuild, as success stories. So I lean yes, but I think it's a very difficult time defining what success is going to look like for 2026, if that makes sense.
I think if you win Rookie of the Year, you're a good player. There are outliers in this regard, but for the most part recently, it has signaled, all right, this guy's going to be a franchise-changing talent. Here are the National League position players that have won Rookie of the Year since 2010. Buster Posey.
Great player.
Bryce Harper.
Great player.
Chris Bryant.
Was a great player
prior to the injuries.
Was a great player.
Corey Seager.
Great player.
Cody Bellinger.
Yeah, had a weird mid part of the career, but yeah.
I think it was injury related. Ronald Acuna Jr.
Yeah.
Pete Alonso.
Yeah.
Corbin Carroll.
Yeah.
Now here's the outliers.
I was going to say, where's Jonathan India in this?
Jonathan India, Michael Harris II. Those are the 2 outliers. Weird seasons, those guys, for whatever reason, it did not continue to translate. But other than that, if you're the National League Rookie of the Year as a position player, you go on to have a really, really productive Major League career. Even on the American League side of things, Connor Henderson, Julio Rodriguez, Randy Rosarena is a very good player, even if not the same level as we thought at the time. Yordan Alvarez, Shohei Ohtani, Aaron Judge, Carlos Correa, Jose Abreu, Mike Trout. The one outlier for them would be Will Myers, who won Rookie of the Year in the American League in 2013. So basically, since 2010, there are 3 outliers that win Rookie of the Year. Everybody else becomes excellent. So if you get that out of J.J. Weatherholt, I think it's a success. I think this season will ultimately be defined for the Cardinals by what you get offensively out of Ivan Herrera, Mason Wynn, J.J. Weatherholt, Alec Burleson. I think those are the 4 names that I would hone in on in 2026. Yes, it is noteworthy that I did not mention Jordan Walker or Nolan Gorman or Lars Nootbaar. I don't think at this point in time I'm expecting them to be a part of the core. They could be. They could work their way back into that. But right now, I am not defining success or failure in 2026 based upon what those guys do. It is about Burley, Wynn, Weatherholt, and Herrera for me.
Yeah, and I would probably limit it to just 2 of those 4. I would probably limit it to just Herrera, because I think we both agree that bat is special, and if he can stay healthy and become a just average catcher defensively and put up the offensive numbers that we have seen when he's been here, that can be a special player. Now, is he a superstar? I don't know, but right now I would circle him as potentially your best bet. That's a guy that's been proven at the big league level. And then the reason that I would say you just circled J.J. Weatherholt is because, like, you're right. If it's Rookie of the Year, that numbers would tell you there's a decent chance he's a pretty good player for you. That's a lot of pressure on a kid, though. Hey, go out here and win Rookie of the Year to define 2026 as a success. Ivan Herrera, yeah, we really need you to be healthy and define the year as a success. Because even if Burley takes the next step, I don't think his next step is like MVP level numbers. I think his next step is he becomes like we just talked about with the A's, or like Josh Naylor. And like Josh Naylor's not a guy that alters the course for a franchise. He's a really good complementary piece. I think the same can be said for Mason Wynn. Now we differ on that. I am very much more on the negative side of Wynn, even though I think he's a good baseball player. But again, I think that's more of a complementary piece that's playing in that shortstop position. So I would say if you're going to put players' names to how you define success, I think it comes down to the two position players would be Herrera and J.J. Weatherholt. And I think for the starting pitching, it would come down to Liam Doyle and Quinn Matthews.
Last thing before we get out of here. John Denton reported the following on Nolan Arenado yesterday.
Is it good?
A source who praised Arenado's professionalism in 2025 when the Cardinals were unable to find another landing spot said a deal for the third baseman may not materialize until spring training when teams start to lose players due to injury. That same source told MLB.com that fans should brace themselves for what St. Louis might get in return for a player with more than 350 career home runs. Quote, the two deals we did earlier in the offseason with Gray and Contreras, the return isn't going to look like that at all, the source said, referring to the 5 pitching prospects that the Cardinals were able to acquire. Quote, the market just isn't there, end quote. T-Bone, do you think Nolan Arenado will be traded prior to opening day?
No. I think he's going to be... I'll say that. I could still see maybe if they're posturing, they could release him. I doubt they do. But I will at least give myself the out that there's the chance that they release him. I don't think he's getting traded. I don't think there's the market. I think the Cardinals are willing to do what it takes to make it happen. And that is eat most of the money, the same way they did with Dexter Fowler. The nice part about that deal is the Angels needed an outfielder. Who's the team that needs a third baseman that wants Nolan Arenado? And, by the way, I should add this as a caveat, is a team he wants to go to because he's got a no-trade clause. Because there was some buzz that maybe the Angels would have interest in him after they restructured Rendon's contract. And then I think John Heyman was the one who reported on his Bleacher Report show, yeah, Arenado doesn't have much interest in going to the LA Angels because they're not a contender. And the Angels don't necessarily want Nolan Arenado either. So this is where I've kept saying and have been barked at by someone that he should be gone, which I agree with, he needs to be gone. You've got to have a match. It's got to match, right? It's like puzzle pieces. You can't just jam that puzzle piece in and say, done, the puzzles come together. No, you have to have the pieces that line up, they match, and they slot in together.
No.
It's not the case, I think, here. I can't find the team for Arenado because the teams that are looking at upgrading at third base, either one, have some posturing like the Red Sox that think they've got someone internal, and I think they would actually do that. Or they're all in on Bregman and the other third baseman, or potential third baseman, and Bo Bichette. I think that's it. I think that's and I don't see a spot for him.
They need to do the puzzle like my 2-year-old does, where he puts the two pieces together and goes, bam! And then the puzzle is complete. It works. It doesn't matter if they actually go together. That is my hard and fast belief on this particular situation. Arenado can't be back. He's not going to be back. I will maintain my belief on that. I will not waver. I have not wavered yet. My confidence was here. It is now here. I don't care. He's going to be gone. He will be playing somewhere else in 2026. That's Tanner Hendrickson. I'm Brandon Kiley. Zane did a fantastic job for us on the video side of things, as he does each and every time that we are here on the Redbird Report. Please stay tuned. Next time that we are doing this show, we will have all of the reaction to the Cardinals winter warm-up. So we'll have that for you guys here in a couple of weeks. Appreciate you tuning in for the offseason edition of the Redbird Report here on 101 ESPN's YouTube page.
Find every episode of the Redbird Report with Brandon Kiley and Tanner Hendrickson on YouTube or at 101ESPN.com.